Meanwhile, we're dealing with a Department of Homeland Security that picks and chooses when it'll address border security concerns.
Most recently, about an Afghan national who came to the United States, an alleged wannabe terrorist, and we don't know how he was cleared to enter this country.
We're getting conflicting answers from your agency and from the State Department about a man who was arrested for an election day terror plot. How do you not have those answers prepared?
Jackie, that's not what I said. What I said is I'd be pleased to discuss this issue at a different time.
The outstanding question is whether this man was radicalized before the U.S. government brought him here or afterward. And people should be concerned about that.
Jackie, your persistence in questioning can be matched by my persistence in answers.
Joining us now, Senator James Lankford, who just returned from a border trip to Arizona. Hey, Senator, good to see you. So again, we just heard the exchange with Mayorkas on this terrorist who came in from Afghanistan. We know other terrorists have come across the southern border. I think a lot of Americans are incredibly concerned, but you were just down at the southern border as a senator. What else have you learned about border security here in the U.S.?
Well, thanks, y'all both, for keeping this in front of people because the popular media wants to just kind of brush this out of the way. This terrorist that was picked up, in fact, it was two terrorists here, were actually picked up just a few miles from my house. So this is very real to us in Oklahoma because these two individuals were here in Oklahoma. They had already purchased weapons, they had already purchased ammunition, and they were planning to be able to carry out a terrorist attack in the United States on Election Day. I've been the last couple of days down in Arizona in a very remote area. Seeing still the gaps in the border wall that still remain, talking to some of the border agents. I literally watched some of the CBP One app individuals that were coming across the border, including some folks from Africa, some folks from Russia, some folks from all over the different regions, including Western Hemisphere. Those folks are coming in every day, and the administration's letting them in and giving them job permits right at the start when we know nothing about these individuals. In fact, some of the individuals showing up didn't even have a photo ID. They literally just had an ID printed with their name on it and said, yeah, this is my ID. We don't know if it's them or not. We don't have any idea of their criminal history. And for the individuals coming from Russia, obviously Russia's not sharing with us their criminal history. And so there's major issues that are still rolling there where this administration is just determined to be able to let people in at the border. If they'll just tell them in advance they're coming, they're just opening up the country, whether we know them or not.
There is just incalculable and even unknowable damage that's been done to this country, financial and otherwise, but also incalculable and unknowable danger. And I just look at the migrant flight parole program that was put in place a couple of years ago just from 4 countries, Senator. So it started in Venezuela, and then it was Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua. Just a week ago, the Biden administration had now announced that this parole program won't be renewed, that after the 2 years in parole expires, they'll have to figure out this more than 500,000 people who are already here through this program will have to figure out another way to stay here or be deported. But the Washington Post reported the program is going to, despite it having fraud, being wrought with fraud, they're continuing to allow 30,000 people in this program into the country every month. It's just astonishing because none of these people are getting vetted, given where they're coming from.
Right. Yeah, we just don't know. And obviously, Venezuela's not sharing records. Nicaragua's not sharing records. Haiti doesn't even have records. I mean, it's just chaos. And what they're trying to determine is, are you on the terror watch list or on the Interpol list? We have no idea of any crimes they've committed in their own country, if they're fleeing poverty or fleeing from the law. That's the issue that we really face. When Trump talks about, hey, these programs will end on day one, we're literally talking thousands of people that are crossing the border today. That won't happen under President Trump. And under President Trump, he can declare all of those individuals in the country under parole that have come in the last couple of years. Just the parole is expired on it, and then they can all be removed. So there are ways to be able to unwind this, but it will take years to be able to unwind this. And in the meantime, the administration continues to allow in thousands of people a day.
What's so frustrating is, again, we disagree with open borders, but minimally you'd think this administration would say, okay, we're not going to let the people in who we can't verify who they are. We don't know if they want to do us harm. We don't know who they are, so they can't come. They don't even take that step to protect us. Real quick, Senator, can this get done, though? Can Donald Trump turn this around relatively quickly with Border Patrol's help?
Oh, 100%, Sean. So day one, he could step in and say all those individuals that a court has already ordered them to have what's called a final order of removal, they could all be removed quickly. They can be identified and removed. These individuals under parole can all be removed. They can stop the parole process of letting more people in day one. They can do expedited removal. There's all the things that can be done. So yes, there are things that can be done by an executive who actually wants to stop illegal immigration. Now, there are things in the law that need to be fixed, the asylum standards, some of those things, that's going to require a law to change. But a dramatic shift can be made immediately with a new president.
Well, we hope that happens. Senator James Lankford, always good to see you. Thanks for being with us, and we do love Oklahoma.